Welcome back into the channel. Today, we're going to be taking a look at NFL free agency and determining which teams are winners and which teams are losers. We're going to go through every single NFL team in this video. It'll be broken down by division. So if you're looking for a specific team, check the timestamps. But without further ado, we have a lot of talking to do, so let's hop into this video, starting with the AFC East. I'm literally just running down the NFL transaction wire here, folks. So the Buffalo Bills, obviously the biggest signing for them was edge Joey Bosa last night. 1 year, $12.6 million deal, $12 million guaranteed, a max value of $15.6 million. Why did Buffalo be aggressive and go get Joey Bosa? The answer is pretty simple. Buffalo has kind of been knocking on the door of a Super Bowl appearance the last, I'd say, 5 years, yet their kryptonite in the playoffs has consistently been the Kansas City Chiefs. They just watched Philadelphia beat the Chiefs by being able to sustain pressure with 4. They also saw the Buccaneers beat them a few years ago in the Super Bowl the exact same way. Buffalo knows that the blueprint on how to beat the Chiefs is out there. Get consistent pressure on Patrick Mahomes with 4. They do a pretty solid job in coverage. Hell, maybe the best job that any team does on Travis Kelce in the NFL at this point in time. And Travis Kelce probably slowing down a little bit further, meaning that that pressure that a team can get on Kansas City only elevates. Buffalo trying to get a premier edge rusher that can help them get that edge rush. You know, premier may be a stretch, because I do think there's a reason that $12 million was the top offer for Joey Bosa. Some of it has to do with a little bit of a dip in production, but I think a lot of it has to do with how many games is this guy actually going to give me. But if Buffalo, for a playoff run, can get a healthy Joey Bosa, this could be the year that they finally break through, because they could finally be able to get that pressure on Patrick Mahomes. That's why Buffalo made this risk, and I love it because it's low-end risk. If it doesn't work out, he's off the team in a year, and that money is back in your cap. So love this move from Buffalo. If you couldn't tell, I think that they're winners for sure. They also agreed to a term on a new 6-year deal worth $330 million with Josh Allen, $250 million guaranteed. Having Josh Allen, a top 3 quarterback in the sport, the reigning MVP, be a Buffalo Bill for life. You love to see that. They extended Khalil Shakur, re-signed Ty Johnson, both of which I think are good moves. Gregory Rousseau signed a 4-year, $80 million extension. You love to keep him around. Terrell Bernard, a 4-year extension worth $50 million. Buffalo, in a way, kind of running it back with just Joey Bosa, but at the end of the day, I think that's a win for Buffalo. They were right there this past year. They're potentially a 4th down conversion away from being in the Super Bowl, and you know, adding a pass rusher like Joey Bosa, that does mean something. The Miami Dolphins, I have them as a massive loser. Massive loser. Their biggest noteworthy signing was Zach Wilson or Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, depending on who you ask. Nick Westbrook-Ikhine is actually pretty solid value. 2 years, $6.5 million for a guy that was pretty productive in Tennessee. But at the end of the day, Miami needed a lot more to be done here. This team missed the playoffs last year, and I just don't see them getting back this year. I think that we're going to talk about another team in their division that lapped them and passed them at this point in time, but they needed edge rushers. They didn't get any. And Joey Bosa was on the market for $12.5 million. They weren't willing to go past 8. They needed another corner alongside Jalen Ramsey. They didn't get one. They lost safety Javon Holland. The Miami Dolphins are taking the wrong steps and going backwards. And the more and more I see the moves that Miami's making, the more and more I believe they're truly going to regret the Tua Tagovailoa contract. When this contract first dropped out, I said that this was a move that they would regret. I got some pushback for it. Some people said, come on, Tua's good. You don't understand ball, blah, blah, blah. Here we are a year later. I had predicted a year ago at this time that the Miami Dolphins would finish 8-9 and miss the playoffs. You wouldn't believe the things that were said to me on Twitter. A year later, quote tweeted by Flaming Hot Takes. Look at how correct this guy is. Just saying, my Miami Dolphins take's been pretty good. This is an L of a free agency. Let's talk about the New England Patriots, who I think they're a top 2 winner in the AFC. Truthfully, I do. They made a lot of really good moves, and I want to start with the defense. Defensive lineman Milton Williams agreed to a 4-year, $151 million deal with $51 million fully guaranteed at signing. This is a massive move. Milton Williams, as you guys know, I am an Eagles fan, so I do have, I believe, a little bit more knowledge on Milton than just your everyday sports reporter guy on YouTube that you're going to see talk about this. Milton was a complementary piece in Philly, a rotational defensive tackle. He wasn't a 3-down guy, but when he was out there, it was high energy, great at sustaining an interior pass rush, had a 17 pressure percent rating when he was out there. So the guy, when he's out there, absolutely produces. A big body, athletic, speed for a defensive tackle, everything that you'd really want to see. He has the build of a superstar defensive tackle in this football league. The one concern that I would have had giving him this money is just in Philly, he played a complementary role. Is he going to be able to transition to being the guy? He played next to Jalen Carter. Can he be Jalen Carter? That's my question. Now, this deal that New England constructed here, though, 4 years, $104 million, $26 million per year. It's the most that they've ever given out in a contract. Yes, that is including Tom Brady in terms of an annual average salary. What a guy Tom was, taking those pay cuts. But the $51 million fully guaranteed. If it doesn't work out and he's just a rotational piece, in 2 years, it's a cuttable contract. I think the contract was done really, really great for New England, and I think that this is a guy certainly worth them taking a shot on. Carlton Davis, 3-year, $60 million deal, a cornerback 2 alongside Christian Gonzalez. They needed one of those. Carlton Davis is one of the better CB2s you can get in this league. He's a physical guy. He can get interceptions. I wouldn't necessarily call him a ball hawk, but he's a very, very solid corner and a great cornerback too. Robert Spillane, this guy just has New England Patriot written all over him. A middle linebacker who was all over the field for the Raiders. I think didn't get enough shine because he was playing for the Raiders. Hell of a piece to bring in. Edge Harold Landry, I'm not crazy about the move. 3 years, $43.5 million, $26 million fully guaranteed. So you could probably cut him after a year or two if things aren't working out. Older player, but they needed an edge rusher. You know, stacking up the defensive line with talent isn't bad. Played with Vrabel previously, so I get that move. Morgan Moses, the offensive tackle, 3-year, $24 million deal. Again, it was Morgan Moses the best option out there? Probably not, but getting Drake May some protection is certainly great there. You know, I would have loved for them to have brought in a wide receiver. At the end of the day, the Patriots did offer Chris Godwin a deal $20 million north of what he got in Tampa, and he decided to stay. At the end of the day, there's not much more you could do than that. They weren't interested in DK, I heard, due to personality reasons. Fair enough, but they certainly are lacking a little bit at the wide receiver position. I wouldn't be shocked if at 4, if Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter are off the board, that this team takes a serious look at Tet McMillan, the wide receiver out of Arizona. Then I have the New York Jets. You know, I have them as a slight winner, I suppose. At the end of the day, the Jets not making a catastrophic move feels like a win for them. Justin Fields, 2 years, $40 million. You're not going to get a starting quarterback for less than that in today's NFL. And Justin Fields, I think, is a fine option. They're going to give him a fair shake at being a starter. His agent basically came out and said that's a condition of where he's going to sign. If he's going to sign somewhere, it is going to be a starting quarterback. And New York, he's going to have that opportunity. The team isn't necessarily ready to win at a high level, and I don't think that their expectation is that Justin Fields comes in and all of a sudden they're winners at a high level. But at the end of the day, his speed, his mobility, he has good deep arm strength, so you could get something there. I liked their moves on the defense, though. You know, Aaron Glenn now in. Defense will continue to be the identity of the New York Jets. Bringing back Sherwood, 3-year, $45 million deal. Absolutely love it. Cornerback Brandon Stevens, 3-year, $36 million contract. Losing DJ Reed, going to Brandon Stevens. On its face value, a little bit of a downgrade, but I think if Aaron Glenn can get Stevens to performing where he was 2 years ago for that Baltimore Ravens defense, the New York Jets could certainly be in business at the cornerback too. And I loved bringing in Andre Sisco for a 1-year deal worth $10 million. I thought he was one of few bright spots on Jacksonville's defense, and I would have loved some more length on this contract if you could have gotten it, but I think Sisco knows that and said, fine, I'll take a 1-year prove-it deal to prove that I'm one of the better safeties in this league. Ultimately, I give the Jets a slight W just because I do think they're headed in the right direction, but we're closer to neutral than a major W, if that makes sense. Up next, we have the AFC North, not a very active division. The Baltimore Ravens, they brought in wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins on a 1-year, $6 million contract. a fine move. He's probably going to be the fourth wide receiver, or I should say the fourth receiving option on this team behind Zay Flowers, Mark Andrews, and some combination of Rashad Bateman and Isaiah Likely. But I do think Hopkins is a solid wide receiver 3 for this team. Could get 700 yards and could certainly be a threat in the red zone. Patrick Ricard back with the team. Love that move. Offensive tackle Ronnie Stanley. This is a guy who was projected to be the #1 tackle on the market. Baltimore re-signed him about a week or two ago, just trying to make sure that he didn't reach the market. Again, Baltimore is very much of the mindset, let's run it back. If Lamar plays better in the playoffs versus Buffalo, doesn't have those turnovers, maybe we're headed to the Super Bowl. I tend to agree with them. I think at the end of the day, their biggest concern is just, can Lamar Jackson play at his MVP level in the playoffs? If that finally happens, I could easily see them breaking through and winning a Super Bowl. The Cincinnati Bengals, man, it's tough for me to give a win or a loss for this team. For the same for the Ravens, they're just kind of a neutral. For the Bengals, it's really a to be determined, because I just have so many questions about, are you extending Jamar Chase? T. Higgins is on the franchise tag. Do you get an extension done? Or now that Jamar Chase wants probably north of $40 million a year, do you need to move on from T. Higgins and trade him? Are you trading Trey Hendrickson? If so, what's the return that you get? Don't get me wrong, around the edges, the Bengals made some fine moves, bringing back Samaje Perine, Mike Gesicki re-signed, BJ Hill, Oren Burks. Like, these are all fine moves, Joseph Asai. But at the end of the day, what the Bengals win or loss of the offseason and free agency is going to be determined on is, what do they do with those main 3 guys? Because they can't keep all 3 of them. Is Trey Hendrickson still the guy that you move? Can you reach an agreement with T. Higgins? Can you reach an agreement with Jamar Chase? At the end of the day, signing a Samaje Perine or bringing in an Oren Burks, those little moves around the edges can be massive for Super Bowl contenders. But the Bengals have missed the playoffs in back-to-back seasons. Right now, I wouldn't classify them as Super Bowl contenders at all. And aside from Joe Burrow, their next 3 most talented players, I have question marks on if they'll be part of the team next year. Serious question marks, even with Jamar Chase, because I just don't know if the Bengals have the capital to pay him. It really could all blow up in Cincinnati. Right now, it's a to be determined. We'll see how things pan out. The Cleveland Browns, I'm going to lean slight win, and that's simply for the fact that they convinced Myles Garrett to stay. Listen, Myles Garrett is the best player of the Browns in my lifetime, bar none, most talented for sure. You know, you could argue the best since Jim Brown, absolutely. The guy is an absolute freak. He leads the NFL in a ton of categories in the last 5 years, from pressures, I think maybe sacks as well, but a 4-year extension includes $123 million guaranteed and a base salary of $140 million. Or excuse me, a base salary of $40 million per year. $140 million would have been nuts. But at the end of the day, this is the guy who sells jerseys. This is the guy who people think of when they think of your team. I understand that you could have gotten an absolute haul for Myles Garrett, but at the end of the day, that defense is strong. And the Browns truly are a real quarterback away from being able to call themselves contenders. Not contenders, but playoff contenders. And if they could draft Cam Ward with Jerry Jeudy, who was top 10 in the NFL in receiving last year, you bring back Nick Chubb, and he's another year removed from that ACL injury. David Njoku still in the squad, a solid offensive line, and a great defense. The Browns can mess around and make the playoffs. It's just the quarterback situation that's really screwing them. Speaking of quarterback situation, they trade for Kenny Pickett. Okay, if the plan's to have him be a backup for the rookie quarterback you draft, or maybe you redshirt the rookie and let Pickett go out there, he's probably better than Watson, truthfully. It's a win for the Browns because they brought back Myles Garrett. The Pittsburgh Steelers, this is going to ruffle some feathers, but I kind of have this as a neutral. The DK Metcalf trade doesn't really make a ton of sense to me. I'm not sure if this is a move of, hey, we're probably not re-signing George Pickens, so let's bring in a better version of George Pickens and just see if they can coexist for a year. But at the end of the day, in terms of, do I think Pittsburgh will be better or worse than last year based on this move? I don't think it's a needle mover at all. The, extension, 4 years, $132 million is fine. It's a little bit of an overpay, but at the end of the day, the next highest paid guy is always the next highest paid guy. So by the end of that DK Metcalf contract, he'll be like the 8th or ninth highest paid wide receiver, and we'll all be going, well, that was fair. But it's just not a needle mover for me. Kenneth Gainwell comes in with Najee Harris out. I think he could win out the starting running back job there. Malik Harrison, 2-year, $10 million deal. At the end of the day, Pittsburgh's big move was bringing in DK Metcalf, but I still don't know who's throwing him the football. And at this rate, it looks like it might be Aaron Rodgers. Is that an upgrade from Russell Wilson? Truthfully, I don't even know anymore. Let's move into the AFC South now, and we'll start with the Houston Texans, who most of their free agency period was built off of trades. They first sent away Laremy Tunsil. They got a slew of draft picks back. On one hand, it's the old Bill Belichick adage, right? Sell a guy a year early rather than a year late. Getting value on Laremy Tunsil now, if you don't plan on giving him money as his guaranteed money is running out, is a smart move from Houston. I just wonder if not giving him money in general was a smart move, because at the end of the day, what's the biggest problem with the Texans? Well, when we think about it, it's the offensive line. CJ Stroud was pressured 38% of the time. That is more than Patrick Mahomes was in the Super Bowl. CJ Stroud was running for his life all season, and that was with a top 3 left tackle in Laremy Tunsil. Now, you could argue the flip side. Why should we pay a guy when our quarterback's already running for his life as is? The answer is probably because it can get worse, and he can be getting pressure from that side now as well. They have some work to do on the offensive line. They fired their offensive line coach. They're moving on from a leader on that team in Laremy Tunsil. We'll see how it works out. Do I love the move? No. Do I hate the move? Not really. Do I love bringing in CJ Gardner-Johnson for a 2026 fifth rounder in Kenyon Green? Absolutely. CJ Gardner-Johnson is going to be a massive addition to this Texans defense. Where is he on the safety scale? Top 10, top 15? I'll let you decide that in the comment section. All I know is the crash outs and the crash downs with CJ Gardner-Johnson and Jalen Petrie. Nobody on the opposing offense that is leaving the tackle box is safe. Protect your running backs, protect your wide receivers over the middle, because these guys are going to lay the hit stick on them. CJ Gardner-Johnson going to fit in very, very well with that Houston Texans defensive culture led by DeMeco Ryans. I have no doubts about it. And as well, they acquired Christian Kirk in a trade with the Jacksonville Jaguars for a 2026 7th round pick. This is huge. I knew that the Texans were going to look to bring in a wide receiver with Tank Dell, obviously projected to miss all of next year. Stephon Diggs is a free agent at this point in time. Christian Kirk, a slot wide receiver that you can have catch 4 or 5 balls a game and be a safety utility weapon for CJ Stroud. That is something that they were missing in the playoffs. They just didn't have a dependable guy outside of Nico Collins in that wide receiver room. Christian Kirk is at least dependable. I like this pickup for them. And as well, they just made some moves around the edges, brought back Mario Edwards, Sheldon Rankins brought in, Derek Barnett, Justin Watson, Laken Tomlinson, Braxton Berrios, all solid deals. I would lean towards this offseason as actually kind of a win for the Texans, despite what some people may think about the Tunsil trade. I don't think that at the end of the day, that's going to be as much of a hindrance for them as it is a come up for the Commanders. I do think that ultimately in a year's time, we'll view that trade as a win-win move, even if you think I'm crazy for saying so right now. The Indianapolis Colts, I think they had a win of an offseason. What was the Colts' main problem last year? Aside from the fact that their quarterback couldn't complete a pass, their defense. Charvarius Ward, 3-year deal worth $60 million, $35 million guaranteed. Love this pickup for them. They needed a cornerback. They went out and got a cornerback. Safety Cameron Bynum, again, 4-year, $60 million contract. Absolutely love it for them. Their secondary was a problem, and they brought in not just one, but 2 guys that could help solve that problem. As well, the Daniel Jones 1-year, $14 million deal. Listen, that's fine. Have him compete with Anthony Richardson. I think there's a shot Daniel Jones wins. I mean, the last time we saw Daniel Jones be successful, and that was when he led the Giants not only to a playoff, but a playoff victory over the Vikings. What were the circumstances there? Offensive-minded head coach that was good, and a talented running back. Brian Daboll, Saquon Barkley. He now goes to an offensive-minded head coach who's good, Shane Steichen, with a talented running back in Jonathan Taylor. There's pieces there that I think if Daniel Jones became the starter, it's not the end of the world for the Colts. And in this division, somebody's got to come in second, and the team that comes in second could potentially get into the wild card spot. The Jacksonville Jaguars, I have a slight W for them as well too. And I get it, maybe I'm being a little bit optimistic for some of you people, but at the end of the day, these NFL GMs are not stupid. They're making moves that could potentially improve their team. The question is how much. The Jacksonville Jaguars, with what they're paying Trevor Lawrence, the draft capital, bringing in a new head coach in Liam Cohen, obviously the goal is to get back to the playoffs. The main signing that I want to focus on here is Jordan Lewis, a 3-year, $30 million deal to play nickel cornerback. I think that this is a steal of a deal. $10 million per year for a really solid nickel corner. They got him locked up for 3 years. Don't be surprised if he outplays this contract. Nickel is quickly becoming, in my estimation, one of the more important positions on the defense, because it's just a guy that has to be able to do absolutely everything, be versatile, and play a ton of football. Cooper DeJean was that for the Eagles in the Super Bowl, and he ends up with a pick 6. Jordan Lewis being that for the Jacksonville Jaguars. I think that he could absolutely help shape this defense. They bring in safety Eric Murray. I don't love the move, but you know, you had to replace Cisco, who was leaving. And then other than that, again, just moves around the edges. Offensive tackle, Robert Hennessy. Offensive guard, Patrick McCarry. Wide receiver, playoff De'Ami Brown. You got to get to the playoffs for him to be playoff De'Ami Brown. And truthfully, in my opinion, it's just adding another Gabe Davis. But you lost Christian Kirk, so you had to bring in a wide receiver option. Slight win for the Jaguars, mostly just because I love the Jordan Lewis move. The Tennessee Titans, I think it was an L. I think it was an L, which I hate to say, Titans fans. The big move was signing offensive tackle Dan Moore Jr. to a 4-year, $82 million deal with $50 million guaranteed. Listen, I like the mindset of attacking the offensive line. I just don't like the guy that the money was given to. I don't think Dan Moore is worth that money. Some of his time in Pittsburgh, I didn't think he played the best football. Hopefully he proves me wrong, Titans fans, but at the end of the day, I'm just not loving this move. Cody Barton, 3-year, $21 million contract. It's a fine move. Not a lot of moves made by the Titans, which is kind of an L because you have the number 1 pick for a reason. It's not like the roster was just out there succeeding at a high level. Granted, the quarterback situation was a lot of the problem, so you take Cam Ward with that number 1 overall pick and maybe everything just gets fixed. Lastly, in the AFC, we head to the AFC West, and we're going to start with who I think may have been my biggest winner in the AFC, and that is the Denver Broncos. The Denver Broncos made 2 moves that I really want to highlight. Bringing in Talona Hufanga, 3-year, $45 million deal at safety, and linebacker Dre Greenlaw, 3-year deal worth $35 million. The Denver Broncos were just snuck into the playoffs last year. The 7 seed went to Buffalo. It was a competitive first half or so, and then Buffalo out-talented them. But that was a massive win for the Denver Broncos. What do they do to ensure that it wasn't a fluke? It wasn't they got lucky and became the 7th seed, but become a main staple of the AFC playoffs. Obviously, first and foremost, continue to develop Bo Nix in that offense. I think they're going to attack skill position players during the draft based on this free agency. But step 2 is make sure that you still have a top-notch defense. The Broncos had one of the better defenses in all of football last year. Singleton, Surtain, you guys know the names. Bringing in Dre Greenlaw, who I think is a very quality linebacker, to play alongside Singleton, an absolute W for the Denver Broncos. And Hufanga, this guy is an absolute missile at the safety position. Winning football games, strong defense, quarterback who takes care of the football, offensive mind in Sean Payton. You just get those skill position guys, which that's what every talented kid's playing nowadays. You could find a consistent wide receiver too in the draft. Ladd McConkey was taken in the 2nd round last year. You can find these guys. The Broncos are setting themselves up that as long as Bo Nix continues to play at the level he was last year of being a playoff staple, and we'll talk about the Chargers in a second, but the Broncos may be setting themselves up to be the 2nd best team in this AFC West. I genuinely mean it. Now, the team that's the best in the AFC West, the Kansas City Chiefs. Listen, their free agency was a win because they basically just retained their team and they were just in the Super Bowl. Nick Bolton, a guy that they had to re-sign, 3 years, $45 million, one of the better tackling linebackers in the NFL in open space. Franchise tag Trey Smith, a guard that they couldn't afford to lose. They lost Joe Thuney, but they kept Trey Smith. That was the more important guy to keep, in my opinion. Hollywood Brown re-signs 1-year deal worth $11 million. Last year, it was the same contract, kind of a prove-it deal. Hollywood Brown gets hurt, doesn't get to play to the contract. At the end of the day, they're running it back. Christian Fulton, 2 years, $20 million, a cornerback 2 for this team. I'm a big fan of what the Chiefs did. You lose some guys, you lose Justin Reed, you lose Joe Tooney. At the end of the day, you have a Super Bowl roster. You're bound to lose players. They'll rebuild through the draft. The Las Vegas Raiders, a W of a free agency. Geno Smith brought in, obviously, that's the big deal with the trade. Basically what the Raiders did, man, and they could have chose one direction or another. It could have been, hey, we're going to tank. We're going to be bad for a couple of years. We're going to try and rebuild and compete with the likes of the Chargers, the Broncos, and the Chiefs in 3 years' time. Or let's be aggressive and let's try and get into the playoffs this year. They chose that path. Geno Smith in a trade, love it. Love it for them. He's way better than any quarterback they've had in recent memory. I think Geno Smith right now is playing better than Derek Carr did for them. So as strangely as it sounds, Geno's the best Seahawks quarterback in a long, long time. They extend Max Crosby 3 years, $106.5 million. Again, keeping your guy, absolutely love it. They also retain Malcolm Kuhn, so their edge rushers are stoked there. You have Christian Wilkins on that interior defensive line. You brought in Eric Stokes. You brought in Jeremy Chin in that secondary. The Raiders are making moves to be a competitive team next year. And for their fans, I'm happy that that is the case. The Chargers, man, this is an L. This is a massive loss of a free agency period. You went into free agency with $90 million to spend if you were the Chargers. And the most notable guy that you brought into the team was Najee Harris. It's not going to cut it. Khalil Mack coming back is excellent for them. Bradley Bozeman re-signing is also good for them. Najee, I don't know if he's even more talented than Dobbins, truthfully. He's more available, and I think in Jim Harbaugh's system, a power back like Najee has the potential to succeed, but I don't think he is game-changing. I don't think he's what Josh Jacobs was to the Packers last year. I don't think he is what Aaron Jones was to the Vikings last year. You know, and he's certainly not in the conversations of Derrick Henry to the Ravens or Saquon to the Eagles. It's a fine move, but with a team that just got absolutely obliterated in the playoffs and shown that they're not at the level of these top-tier AFC teams yet, with $90 million in free agency, they didn't get the job done. And DK Metcalf was available for trade. That's a guy that they needed. They have no outside wide receiver presence. You can't possibly have watched that playoff game and saw Ladd McConkey as the only guy that could get open and be like, let's run it back. And you lost Josh Palmer. Not that the receiving core was special, but you lost a guy that was a main staple of it, and I would argue your second most talented receiver. I have some real concerns for the Los Angeles Chargers, and they better be picking up the phone and calling Stephon Diggs and hoping he's got gas left in the tank. Let's hop on over to the NFC. Starting in the NFC East with the Dallas Cowboys, this has to be an L, man. Even though I love bringing back Odigizua on the defensive tackle side, 4 years, $80 million. You lose Jordan Lewis, your nickel corner. Not a good sight there. And again, a team that missed the playoffs, not making moves to get out here and get better. Javonte Williams, 1 year, $3 million. Solomon Thomas, Marquise Bell, like these are not great moves. I like that you retained Odigizua, and Kavonte Turpin's an absolute playmaker, but at the end of the day, if you're Dallas, you're not catching up to Philly and Washington with moves like this. At the end of the day, the Dak Prescott $60 million a year, $90 million cap hit next year contract is absolutely hindering you. You extended CeeDee Lamb because you had to, and you can't spend money because you have to extend Micah Parsons. 3 guys making that kind of money really limits what you could do around the rest of the roster. And in terms of free agency, man, they're just never going to be able to get things done. They have to build through the draft when they have those 3 premier players making a ton of money. At the end of the day, free agency is pretty much always just going to be an L for them because they're not going to be able to bring in this high-end talent. They're going to have to work around the edges. And the guys that they brought in, I just don't think were difference makers. I think like an Andre Sisco would have been a better option. I think you should have found a way to retain Jordan Lewis. I don't love what the Cowboys are doing. I do love what the New York Giants are doing. The New York Giants had a really solid free agency. They added in some pieces to that defense that I think are really going to help. Javon Holland, 3 years, $45 million. That includes $30 million in guarantees. So essentially a 2-year deal, but I think Javon Holland will play it to a 3-year deal. They'll keep him on that roster for sure. Paulson Adebo, 3-year, $54 million contract. This guy is an absolute stud. I think he's going to play up to this contract. His time in New Orleans, he's been a really, really good corner, a ball hawk player as well, can certainly force a turnover. I like Chauncey Golston on the edge rusher. Again, their defense is where the Giants are focusing right now. Bringing in Darius Slayton on a 3-year, $36 million deal is absolutely comical. The fact that you're willing to give Slayton $13 million a year, but Saquon for $13.5 was too much for them is just, that's hilarious. Again, I like what they're doing. That's absolutely hilarious. But the New York Giants are building a good foundation. Some of their moves are leading me to think that they may be going Cam Ward or Shador. Tommy DeVito re-signed, but he's just going to kind of be the backup quarterback. The Giants' moves are making me think either one, they're the team that's going to get Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson, or two, they are committed to drafting quarterback at the top of this year's draft, whether it is Cam Ward or Shador Sanders. Philadelphia Eagles, man, not a lot to talk about here. I'm pretty neutral on the offseason. At the end of the day, you knew you were going to lose talent when you're a Super Bowl roster, but they re-signed Zach Bond, 3 years, $51 million. I think that was a massive piece that they had to sign. An all-pro linebacker who they got on a really, really cheap deal a year ago. Now it's time to pay the piper and get Zach Bond his bag, and he absolutely deserves every piece of it. He's one of the better linebackers in football, excellent in pass coverage, and as well, really good against the run. Guy forces turnovers as well, can get interceptions, can force fumbles. Zach Bond is a real playmaker. They give Saquon Barkley an extension. They trade away C.J. Gardner-Johnson, which I really didn't like, but I don't hate it enough to call the free agency period an L necessarily. Philly's got some work to do through the draft, but again, similar to the way I talked about Kansas City, when you're a team that's in the Super Bowl pretty consistently over the last 3 years, you lose talent and you rebuild through the draft. Philly will have that opportunity to rebuild that defense through the draft with guys that they lost like CJ, Milton Williams, Josh Sweat, all to free agency period. The Washington Commanders, man, some people I'm seeing, they don't like this free agency because they're saying that the Commanders are trying to microwave and nuke this thing and get there too quickly. Guys, this is a team that was just in the NFC Championship. This offseason is for sure a win in my opinion. Every time that you have a quarterback on that rookie contract that you know is a special player, you should go all in immediately when you are not paying him. It is the old Pete Carroll adage, but I think that it makes a ton of sense. Build the roster first, then bring in the quarterback. The Commanders didn't quite do that, but they found the quarterback and are like, let's build the roster immediately while we have the money to spend. Your job as a front office is to make the quarterback's life as easy as possible. The Washington Commanders front office understands that and made moves to do so. They traded for offensive tackle Laremy Tunsil. Is this guy headed for a fall off? Maybe, but was he a top 3 tackle last year? Absolutely he was. Getting that for Jaden Daniels is for sure a win. Deebo Samuel, who they traded for, is he overpaid? Absolutely. Guess what? When you're not paying Jaden Daniels, you could afford to spend a little extra on a Deebo Samuel to ensure he's there. A weapon for Jaden Daniels, a yak guy for Jaden Daniels, an underneath wide receiver. This is a guy who Olamide Zaccheaus and De'Ami Brown were his wide receiver 2s last year. Now he gets Deebo Samuel as his wide receiver 2. That's an upgrade. Bringing back Bobby Wagner and bringing back Zach Ertz, veterans who absolutely made impacts on this team last year, for sure wins. The only contract that I didn't like, and it's pretty popular, Javon Kinlaw, 3 for $45 with $30 million guaranteed. So it's really a 2-year deal, but I don't think he's good. I just don't think he's good at the NFL level. He keeps on getting paid, so maybe there's something that these GMs are seeing that I'm not seeing. I know Adam Peters has a history with him in San Francisco. Again, when you're not paying Jaden Daniels, you could overpay for guys. I felt like Kinlaw was an overpay, but the people saying that the Commanders are not having a good free agency because they're trying to rush the process too much. Screw that, man. When you were just in the NFC Championship, you absolutely go all in on the roster next year. Up next, we head to the NFC North, and I want to start with a team that I think did a lot of work to really improve their roster, and that is the Chicago Bears, man. I think the Bears are building the right way, and that is through the trenches. They trade for offensive guards Jonah Jackson and Joe Thuney, and they signed center Drew Dahlman to a 3-year, $42 million contract. The Bears' offensive line has been atrocious my entire lifetime. Like, let's call a spade a spade. They are finally set up in a spot next year where they may not just have an okay offensive line. They might have a good offensive line. That's going to spell success for Ben Johnson, Caleb Williams, Rome Odunze, DJ Moore, DeAndre Swift, a potential Ashton Genty that I think they might be drafting at 10. Like, the Bears offense is going to look so much better next year, not just because of these offensive line moves, but I think the offensive line moves are a huge part of this. At the end of the day, yes, the quarterback is the most important position in the sport, and Caleb Williams will determine if the Bears are bad, good, a playoff team with Super Bowl contenders. He determines that ceiling. But at the end of the day, football is played in the trenches. This is a big man sport, and the Chicago Bears are boosting the big men on their team, and they're boosting the other side of the line too, bringing in Dayo Odingibowo. Sorry, terrible pronunciation, but you know who he is. 3 years, $48 million for the edge rusher. Defensive tackle Grady Jarrett, 3 years, $43.5 million. Again, establish the trenches. Dominate the line of scrimmage. That is how you win football games. The Chicago Bears are finally showing that they know that. And if I'm a Bears fan, man, I am getting excited. Detroit Lions, this was an L. This was an absolute L of a free agency period. DJ Reed's fine, and I like DJ Reed, so don't hear what I'm not saying there. I like DJ Reed, but you lost Carlton Davis. Feels kind of a neutral move to me there. The Detroit Lions needed to attack an edge rusher or an interior pass rush, somebody else beside Aiden Hutchinson on that defensive line to make plays. And they didn't. They brought back Marcus Davenport, who's not even that good, and they released Zadarius Smith. This was a team that should have been going after Joey Bosa. This is a team who should have been, going after who the Chicago Bears did in Odingiboua. This is a team that should have tried to get a Grady Jarrett, tried to get a Jonathan Allen, tried to get a Javon Hargrave, and instead they lost those guys, and not only lost them, but lost them to division rivals. The Detroit Lions, I'm telling you, man, the window of opportunity, it may have passed them by. And there's still time for them to make a Trey Hendrickson deal, or them to, it'll probably be Von Miller, and maybe he produces at some level for them, but the Detroit Lions, I'm not feeling good about them at this current spot. I'm just not. The Green Bay Packers. The Green Bay Packers, this was an L for me as well. Listen, Aaron Banks, 4 year, $77 million at the guard spot is fine. Nate Hobbs, 4 year, $48 million. The replacement for Jair Alexander, right now, I think he's worse. Could they work him to be better in that contract, or at least as good potentially? This team needed a wide receiver one. This team needed a weapon one. DK Metcalf was available for trade. Chris Godwin was a free agent. There are guys that you could have gotten that you didn't. And at the end of the day, while you're always going to have a good offensive line if you're Green Bay, and that's important, and you bring in a corner Nate Hobbs to replace Jair Alexander, who you're going to release, you didn't do anything, in my estimation, to put you over these other teams in the NFC North that were ahead of you. The Bears may have caught up to you, and I have some question marks on if the Packers will even be in the playoffs next year. They may have been passed by and didn't get Devontae, didn't get Godwin, didn't get DK. If you roll out there again next year with Jaden Reed and Romeo Doubs and tell me you got 4 wide receiver ones, I think the Packers are in some serious trouble. The Minnesota Vikings, man, this was one of, if not my favorite, free agency. For starters, re-signing Aaron Jones and Byron Murphy, massive success. Byron Murphy was a Pro Bowl level cornerback last year, got him for 3 years, $54 million. Aaron Jones was a stud for this team in the role that they need him to be. 2 years, 20 million. Going to be a great guy to have in the backfield next to a young quarterback in JJ McCarthy. What else did you do to help out JJ McCarthy? Offensive guard, Will Fries, the best guard on the market, 5 years, $88 million deal. Ryan Kelly, a veteran center who played next to Fries, 2 years, $18 million deal. Continuity on the offensive line, it matters. A veteran presence on the offensive line, it matters. Talent on the offensive line, it freaking matters, man. And is JJ McCarthy going to be good? I don't know. But the Vikings are putting him in a position to succeed. A top 10 offensive line, a good running back, a wide receiver in Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson. If JJ McCarthy's good, this team's going to win a lot of games. And the offense is going to be very good, like it was last year. But that's not all, man. Defensive tackle Jonathan Allen comes in on a 3-year, $51 million deal. And it's not finalized yet, but the report is saying Javon Hargrave. So that defensive line is going to have Jonathan Allen, Javon Hargrave, Jonathan Grenard, who is a Pro Bowler, is Dallas Turner, slipping my mind, a first-round pick last year out of Alabama, Andrew Van Ginkel, one of the more versatile linebackers in all of football, and Brian Flores is coaching that unit that was already excellent last year. Again, the Minnesota Vikings' fate and season certainly falls on how good JJ McCarthy is, but every other spot on this team is an A unit, okay? This is how you build a foundation for a quarterback to succeed. We'll find out this year how good JJ McCarthy is, because he'll have nothing but opportunity to succeed with what Minnesota has put around him. Next, we move into the NFC South, and we're starting with an L, the Atlanta Falcons. Dude, the Falcons, I can't imagine being a Falcons fan with what I've seen from them this offseason so far. Offensive tackle Jake Matthews, bringing him back, for sure a win. Didn't bring back your Pro Bowl level center, Drew Dahlman. And the one spot on this team that I think everybody that watches football could agree that the Atlanta Falcons needed help at was edge rusher. And their solution, Leonard Floyd, who was cut from the 49ers. What are we doing? What are we doing, Atlanta? Because I get it, you got that money in Kirk Cousins, so it's not a ton of money to spend, but Joey Bosa was $12 million. You gave Leonard Floyd 10. It's just not spending smart money. And Atlanta, who is blessed by being in this NFC South and has a shot to be a playoff team, isn't making the moves necessary to catch up to Tampa, who's a better roster than them. And I just don't know if I have faith in this team. We'll see what they do in the draft, but this was an L of a free agency period. Carolina Panthers, I think a slight W. J.C. Horn agreed to a 4-year extension. That's huge. Lock up your CB1. Trayvon Moehrig, safety, 3 years, $51 million. Love this move for them as well. And Tershawn Wharton, 3-year deal worth up to $54 million. 3 big moves on that defense. Wharton should be able to give them some interior pass rush. I like that pickup for them. And then some moves around the edges. Tommy Tremble, bring him in. Some offensive linemen here. It wasn't too crazy of an offseason for the Panthers. I think they're moving in the right direction. I liked the Moehrig signing, so I am going to give it a slight W, but Carolina, I think it's more about developing the talent they have and seeing what you can get in a full season coming up with Dave Canales and Bryce Young. The New Orleans Saints as well, pretty neutral. They just don't have the money to do much, so they kind of stayed as is with Jawan Johnson and Chase Young. They brought in safety Justin Reed to play alongside the Honey Badger again, so it'll be a good safety duo, but at the end of the day, the Saints can only go so far with Derek Carr at quarterback. The Buccaneers, man, this was a free agency that I really liked. Chris Godwin, getting him to sign on a 3-year, $66 million deal is an absolute steal for them. Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Jalen McMillan, Bucky Irving, Rashad White, Cade Otton, with Baker leading the way, who should have been a Pro Bowl quarterback last year. Like, this is a good offense. And in this division, this is, again, looks like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers division for the taking. You brought back Levante David. You brought back Bredesen. You signed Hassan Reddick. It's not a ton of moves, but it's smart moves. And that is what Tampa has consistently done. And that's why Tampa has consistently stayed ahead of the Falcons, the Panthers, and the Saints. I think the Panthers could be coming, and the Falcons have the talent to compete, but they don't seem to have the front office to make the moves. Tampa Bay is in a really, really good spot here. They have the best quarterback in the division, and they seem to have the smartest front office as well. Tampa Bay with an absolute win in free agency. And lastly, we hop into the NFC West here. If you're still watching the video and you haven't hit the like or subscribe button at this point, please do so. And if you just skip to the NFC West because your team's in here, I've been rambling for about 50 minutes now about ball, so I had the right to ask for that like and subscribe. The Arizona Cardinals, man, a neutral. Listen, Josh Sweat, 4-year contract, $76 million. It's fine. You know, I think getting Josh Sweat for under $20 million a year is good value. The guy could have been Super Bowl MVP, $41 million guaranteed. So it's really just a 2-year guaranteed deal. I love the contract. Do I love the player? No, but I like the player in Josh Sweat, reunited with Jonathan Gannon on this Cardinals team. Jacoby Brissett at backup quarterback's nice. Some moves on the offensive line, re-signing Baron Browning. So you got your 2 edge rushers there. The Cardinals, again, it's really about developing the young talent, but they've made some nice moves around the edges. I'm pretty neutral. I would lean maybe slight W. The Los Angeles Rams, major W. Huge W on their offseason here. Matthew Stafford restructure and getting him to stay is an absolute victory for this team. They gave the Eagles the toughest game on their path to a Super Bowl. They easily should be in their mind that they could win the Super Bowl this year, and they clearly were because they brought in Devontae Adams, 2-year contract worth $46 million. You could argue him and Puka are the best wide receiver duo in all of football now. Feels like that conversation could happen another day on this channel, but I'm not going to have it today. Either way, Devontae Adams is a much upgraded over Cooper Kupp at this point in their careers. I don't know how teams are going to defend both him and Puka, truthfully. Alaric Jackson re-signing on a 3-year, $57 million deal. Great. Protect Stafford with a tackle. Defensive line, Poona Ford, 3-year deal worth up to $29.6 million. Him alongside Braden Fisk and Jared Verse. The Rams know how to win, man. Quarterback, excellent weapons for him. Sign the offensive line, sign the defensive line, develop the younger talent on that defense. This NFC West after this offseason feels like it's got to be the Rams for the taking. And that being said, the 49ers, man, a big L. It's not what they did do, it's what they didn't do, or the guys that they lost. Debo, Hargrave, Hufanga, cutting Juszczyk. You know, they lost so much talent. They lost a ton of guys that were producers for them. And Dre Greenlaw and Malik Collins and just a ton of guys, Charvarius Ward, that were huge for this team, and especially huge for the defense, that are just no longer there, man. Like, you brought in a DeMarcus Robinson and a Richie Grant, but these are not high-level players. And at the end of the day, this is all in an effort to pay Brock Purdy, a guy who's going to go from a league minimum to $50+ million a year. And it's great for Brock Purdy, but when you're paying Purdy $50+ million, Bosa $34 million, Ayuk $30 million, you got to pay Kittle, McCaffrey, Fred Warner. Once you pay those 7 guys, there's not a lot left for the rest of the roster, and cuts got to be made. And Trent Williams, and there's still talent here, but at the end of the day, this feels just like a potential playoff team rather than a potential Super Bowl team. I think the 49ers missed their window, and the fact that they couldn't even get Joey Bosa to come play with his brother Nick, it tells you something. I think it's very, very telling, and this was an L of an offseason for the 49ers. Seattle Seahawks, man, I may be in the minority. I think it was a W. I think not paying Geno Smith when he's not a Super Bowl winning quarterback was the correct move for them. I think Sam Darnold on this 3-year, $100 million deal worth just $55 million guaranteed. So if it's not working out in 2 years, you could say he was just a bridge quarterback and cut him. I like what they're doing. You sign Darnold, you draft a guy like Jackson Dart or Kyle McCord to back him up for a year or two and let him learn. You brought back Ernest Jones, 3 years, $33 million. I mean, I have some question marks, seriously, about how Darnold's going to play without DK Lockett and no offensive line. And Seattle may regress next year. But I think in terms of direction for the franchise, rather than just committing to being this 9-10 win team that is going to get eliminated on wildcard weekend, trying to see a brighter future for you, you guys know my adage here. If you're not competing for Super Bowls, might as well compete for the first round pick. I know it's not how the NFL works, but Seattle, I think, while next year they won't be competing for a Super Bowl, didn't tie themselves to being a wild card team at best. And I like the move that they made. Again, Sam Darnold for 12 to 15 million less per year than Geno Smith. I think that's a win for Seattle. I'm not one of those guys on YouTube that's going to tell you Geno Smith the top 10 quarterback. I don't see it. And again, I can't stress it. I love the Ernest Jones signing. I absolutely love it. As always, guys, these are my thoughts. A very long 1st and 30 pod here. If you made it this far, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. The best free ways to support the channel. I appreciate your guys' support. We'll be back up here shortly to talk some more NFL. Peace.